Welcome to the Thinking Abyss podcast, a philosophical journey through consciousness, reality, and the phenomena that challenge our understanding of existence. From ancient wisdom to cutting-edge theories, we explore where philosophy meets science and curiosity leads to the edge of the unknown.
Okay, think about this for a second. What's the one thing you probably never question? That feeling of time passing, right?
Right. The clock ticking, seconds moving forward.
Exactly. It feels like a river, constantly flowing, pushing us out of the past into the future. You feel it, right? That constant march.
Absolutely. It's maybe the most fundamental experience we have.
But what if? What if that feeling, that unstoppable flow, was just, I don't know, really elaborate illusion? Like, what if the universe isn't flowing anywhere? What if it's more like a solid block and time isn't moving? What if the movement is just happening inside our heads?
That's a pretty staggering thought.
It is. And that's the huge, kind of unsettling question we're diving into today. We've pulled together a whole lot of material.
From some pretty heavy-hitting fields.
Yeah, exactly. Physics, philosophy, even neuroscience. We're aiming for a really comprehensive look at this idea. Is time an illusion?
And it's important to say up front, this isn't about finding a simple yes or no.
Definitely not. The sources themselves show just how complex and, frankly, unresolved this is. It's still one of the biggest open questions out there.
So our goal is more about digging into why it's such a hard question. What are the specific insights from physics or the brain sciences that challenge our basic assumptions?
Right. We want you to really get the different layers of the problem, the nuances.
Okay, let's unpack this.
And the place to start has to be that gut feeling, that intuition about time we all share. The one that, for centuries, seemed like common sense.
Yeah, you have to start there. Because historically, especially in classical physics, like Newton's era, time was seen as, well, absolute.
Absolute.
Meaning it was the same everywhere for everyone. Newton actually called it absolute true and mathematical time. He said it flows equably without relation to anything external.
Like a cosmic metronome ticking away uniformly for the entire universe.
Precisely. A universal standard. If you and I synchronized watches right here, the assumption was they'd stay perfectly in sync with identical watches, say, on Mars, or even in another galaxy.
There was this idea of a single shared now across all of space. Universal simultaneity. That's bedrock for our intuition, isn't it?
It absolutely is. That shared present moment, but then the 20th century happened.
I mean, modern physics landed like a bomb.
Huh. Yeah, you could say that.
All right.
It didn't just adjust the idea of time. It fundamentally shattered that classical intuitive picture, especially with the work of Albert Einstein.
Right, relativity. That's where things get really weird. So what exactly did relativity do to this idea of a universal now?
Well, Einstein gave us two theories, special and general relativity. Special deals with constant motion, general brings in gravity. But the crucial takeaway from both is that time is not absolute, it's relative.
Relative to the observer.
Exactly. Let's focus on special relativity for a moment. The source material really highlights this thing called time dilation.
Time dilation. Okay.
Yeah. It basically means time's passage literally changes depending on how you're moving. If you're standing still and someone zooms past you really, really fast.
Like close to the speed of light, fast.
Right, relativistic speeds. Your clocks won't agree. A minute for you might be longer or shorter than a minute for them. It depends on your relative motion.
And this isn't just like a clock malfunction.
No, that's the key. It's not about measurement error. It's an actual physical difference in the rate time passes in different frames of reference. It's woven into the fabric of space-time itself.
Wow. So the famous twin paradox example,
Yeah.
that's real. One twin goes on a super fast space trip, comes back, and they've aged less than the twin who stayed home.
That's the classic illustration, yes. Less time has objectively passed for the traveling twin because their path through space-time was different, and faster motion slows down their clock relative to the stationary twin.
Okay, my head hurts already. But if time passes differently for different observers, what does that do to the idea of simultaneity, that shared now?
It completely demolishes it. If two events happen at the same time for me, say two firecrackers going off at opposite ends of a moving train platform, they might not happen at the same time for someone else who's moving relative to me, maybe someone on the train itself. There's no universal agreement on what's happening right now.
So there's no single objective cosmic now, just My now, your now, depending on how we're moving.
That's the consequence. The idea of a universal present, that synchronized march forward, it just collapses, which of course raises huge questions.
If time is relative, what even is the present?
Exactly. And this directly feeds into an even more radical idea that emerges from relativity, this concept called the block universe.
The block universe. Okay, this sounds like where physics really starts suggesting the flow itself might be the illusion.
That's right. It's probably the most profound challenge to our everyday experience of time flowing. It comes from taking relativity's implications seriously.
So what is it? What's the block universe theory?
Well, think about space-time. Relativity treats time as a fourth dimension, alongside the three spatial dimensions length, width, height.
Right, space-time.
The block universe model, which uses the geometry developed by Minkowski, basically says the entire universe, all of space, and all of time exists as a single, static, four-dimensional block.
Static, like unchanging.
In a way, yes. Time isn't seen as this dynamic river flowing. It's just another dimension, like length. It's already there, laid out.
So just like up and down exist, past and future also just
Precisely. The core idea is that the past, the present, and the future are all equally real and coexist within this block. They're just different locations in space-time.
You used an analogy before, like a loaf of bread.
Yeah, imagine the universe as a giant loaf of space-time bread. Each slice is a moment in time.
Okay.
One slice might be the dinosaurs roaming. Another slice is today. Another slice is the year 3000 AD. In the block universe model, all those slices already exist as part of the loaf.
They're all structurally present.
Right. We just perceive ourselves moving through the slices from past towards future. But the whole loaf, the entire timeline, is already there.
Okay, but if the whole timeline exists simultaneously, then what about our feeling of time flowing? That feeling that the future is uncertain and the past is gone.
Well, that's the kicker. If the block universe model is correct, then that subjective feeling of flow, the sense that time is moving forward, must be an illusion.
An illusion generated. How?
That's the big question. Maybe it's related to consciousness, our perspective moving through the static block. The movement isn't an external reality, it's in our perception of it.
So connecting the dots here. If the future already exists as a place in this block, just like, say, Tokyo exists, even though I'm not there right now, then my future is already out there.
That's the implication. The event of your next birthday or even your death in this model is just another coordinate in the space-time block. It's as real as your birth date. We just haven't reached that coordinate in our subjective journey yet.
Wow. That has huge philosophical consequences. What about free will? If my future choices are already part of this fixed block.
That's the conflict, absolutely. The block universe strongly implies a kind of determinism. Your choices aren't creating the future. They're simply part of the pattern that already exists in the block.
So causality isn't about making things happen, but more like following a pre-drawn path in this geometry.
In this view, yes. Causality becomes a relationship between points in the block. You embedded within the structure, moving along your world line, rather than dynamically forging a path into an open future.
That really changes how you think about, well, everything. The urgency we feel, the worry about what's next.
It potentially reframes it entirely. The future isn't something that will happen. It is, we just haven't subjectively experienced that part of the block yet.
Okay, deep breaths. Now, you mentioned physics gets even more complicated. Our sources touch on quantum mechanics, too.
Right. Just briefly, because the details get incredibly technical fast, but it adds another layer of complexity. When physicists try to merge general relativity, our theory of gravity and large scales, with quantum mechanics, the theory of very small, to create a theory of quantum gravity, well, things get weird with time.
How so?
In some leading approaches, like using something called the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, the variable for time just disappears from the fundamental equations. It drops out entirely.
Time disappears.
At that fundamental level, potentially, yes. This leads some physicists to argue that time might not be a fundamental property of reality at all, but rather an emergent phenomenon, something that appears at larger scales but isn't there at the most basic level.
Okay, so let me recap the physics part. Relativity tells us time is relative, shattering the idea of a universal now and leading to the block universe where past, present, future all coexist.
Right, suggesting flow is illusory.
And then quantum physics comes along and suggests time might not even be fundamental at the deepest level.
It's a powerful assault on our intuition from multiple angles in physics. It strongly suggests that our subjective experience of time flowing forward isn't mirroring an objective external reality.
Which is the perfect pivot. Because if the universe itself might be static, or if time isn't even fundamental, why do we feel it so strongly? Why this constant sense of flow? Where does that come from?
Exactly. If the cosmic river isn't flowing, why does our internal experience feel like a raging current?
So what does this all mean if our very perception is flawed?
Well, this is where we shift focus entirely, away from the cosmos, inward.
Here's where it gets really interesting, into neuroscience.
Yes, neuroscience kind of sidesteps the is time real out there debate. Instead, it asks, how does the brain create our experience of time?
So it's about the construction of time inside our heads.
Precisely. And the findings are fascinating. It turns out our brains aren't just passively recording time like a clock. They are actively constructing our temporal experience.
Actively building it.
Yeah. They stitch together sensory information, which arrives at different speeds, and they organize it into a coherent story of what happened when. There isn't one single time organ in the brain.
No time center.
No, it's more like a complex network. Different parts handle different aspects. The source material mentions key components involved.
Like what? What parts are doing this construction?
Well, for sequencing, figuring out the order of events, structures, like the hippocampus, which is crucial for memory, seem really important. They help link events together in time.
Okay, so memory helps build a sequence. What about the feeling of duration? How long something lasts?
That seems to involve different areas, like the basal ganglia and the cerebellum. These areas seem to act like internal pacemakers or oscillators.
Oscillators, like tiny internal clocks.
Kind of. They fire rhythmically, and the idea is the brain sort of counts these neural pulses to estimate how much time has passed. It's not a precise clock, though.
Not precise, which explains why our sense of time can feel so wonky sometimes.
Exactly. Because it's not one solid clock, but this distributed network relying on these internal pacemakers, it's highly influenced by things like attention, emotion, and brain chemistry.
Brain chemistry. Neurotransmitters.
Definitely. Our sources point specifically to dopamine and noradrenaline. When you're highly aroused, maybe scared or really excited or deeply focused, your brain releases more of these chemicals. And increased dopamine, for example, seems to actually speed up those internal oscillators, particularly in the basal ganglia.
Okay, wait. If the internal clock speeds up, what does that do to my perception of external time?
Think about it. If your internal ticks are happening faster than during one external minute, your brain counts more ticks than usual, so it feels like more time has passed. That external minute feels longer.
Is that why time seems to slow down during, say, an accident? That feeling of slow motion?
That's one prominent theory, yes. The high adrenaline and dopamine state makes your internal clock tick faster, so the external events seem stretched out.
Wow. Okay, what about the opposite? Time flies when you're having fun.
Right. So the idea there is that enjoyable activities, things that give you a dopamine reward, might actually slow down those internal oscillators relative to the task. Or perhaps attention shifts away from timekeeping. If fewer ticks are registered during an external hour...
That hour feels shorter. It flew by.
Exactly. It's not just a metaphor. Your subjective experience of duration is being actively modulated by your neurochemistry and attentional state. It's a calculation, not a direct perception of some external flow.
So duration is flexible. What about sequence? Does the brain mess with the order of things too?
It does. It has to, because sensory information from different sources, eyes, ears, touch, takes different amounts of time to reach the brain and get processed.
Right. Light travels faster than sound. Processing speeds differ.
Exactly. If the brain just presented information raw as it arrived, the world would seem disjointed, out of sync. So the brain does this incredible job of editing and synchronizing.
Editing reality.
In a sense.
You know,
It holds back faster signals slightly, maybe predicts where things are going, to create a smooth, unified experience of the present moment. Our sources mention things like the flash lag effect.
flash lag act.
Yeah, it's a perceptual illusion. If you have an object moving across your vision and another object flashes right next to it, precisely when they are physically aligned,
Okay.
you'll actually perceive the moving object as being slightly ahead of the flashed object.
It had. But they were aligned.
Physically aligned, yes. But your brain seems to anticipate the moving object's trajectory and projects its perceived position slightly forward in time to compensate for processing delays. It's showing you a slightly predictive, smoothed-out version of reality.
That is mind-blowing. The brain isn't just recording the present. It's constructing a slightly future present. to make things seem smooth.
It underlines the point. What feels like immediate, direct perception of time unfolding is actually this incredibly sophisticated, edited, and constructed internal narrative.
So, bringing this back to the main question, how does this neuroscience perspective strengthen the time is an illusion argument?
Well, it shows that the most direct evidence we think we have for time's flow, our own conscious experience, is itself a manufactured product. It's built by the brain, influenced by chemicals, subject to illusions like time dilations or the flash lag.
It's not a clear window onto external reality.
Not at all. It seems to be a user interface, a useful fiction the brain creates, perhaps to help us navigate and interact with a world that fundamentally might be structured very differently, maybe like that static block universe physics suggests.
So physics chips away at objective time flow from the outside, and neuroscience chips away at subjective time flow from the inside.
It's a powerful pincer movement against our basic intuition. It forces us to ask much more nuanced questions.
Which brings us to the synthesis part. How do we put all this together without just saying, okay, time's fake, let's move on? Because clearly something is happening.
Absolutely. And again, the goal isn't dismissal. It's understanding the complexity. We've seen physics grapple with time as a dimension, possibly static, maybe not fundamental.
Right.
And we've seen neuroscience reveal our experience of time as an active brain construction.
So the synthesis needs to make some careful distinctions.
Yeah.
What exactly are we calling potentially illusory?
This is the key takeaway from the source's conclusions. They suggest a three-part distinction is really helpful here.
Okay, what's the first part?
First, the feeling of flow. That ordinary, subjective experience of time relentlessly moving forward, the past vanishing, the future arriving. That specific sensation might be the illusion.
The narrative the brain creates.
Yeah.
The user interface.
Exactly. It's potentially a feature of consciousness, maybe necessary for how we function, but not necessarily a feature of external reality itself.
Okay, so the flow is debatable. What's not dismissed?
Two crucial things. Second, time itself as a dimension seems real. Physics still operates with time as a fundamental coordinate in space-time. Whether it flows or is static like in the block universe, the dimension of time duration, sequence is a real phenomenon that physics needs to account for.
We can measure duration. Things happen in sequence. That aspect isn't being denied.
Correct. Its nature is debated, but its reality as a dimension isn't typically the part physicists call illusory. And third, our temporal experience, the fact that we have these subjective feelings of duration and sequence, is also a real phenomena.
How so? Even if it's constructed.
Yes, because the construction process itself is real. The neural activity, the chemical modulations, the way the brain builds this experience, that's a genuine, complex biological and psychological reality that needs explanation. Your feeling of time passing is undeniably real as a feeling, even if the external reality it seems to represent isn't quite right.
Ah, I see. That's a much more sophisticated picture. The flow might be illusory, but the dimension of time and the experience of time are real phenomena.
Precisely. It shifts the question from a simple real or fake to something much more interesting. How does this real dimension of time relate to this real neurological experience that feels like flow? Why did consciousness evolve to represent this dimension in this particular, seemingly illusory way?
So we're not dismissing time, just our intuitive, perhaps naive understanding of it, like the Newtonian view.
Exactly. We're light with the reality of a temporal dimension described by physics, and the reality of a complex brain process creating our subjective sense of that dimension. The ongoing mystery lies in bridging those two realities.
It's kind of humbling, isn't it, to think that this feeling of moving through life moment by moment might be this incredibly clever trick our brain evolved.
A trick to help us navigate what might be a static four-dimensional reality. It reframes the purpose of that feeling. Maybe the illusion of flow isn't a mistake, but a feature.
A necessary feature.
Perhaps necessary for things like planning, motivation, cause and effect reasoning, maybe even free will, even if the underlying physics doesn't have that same dynamic quality. The illusion could be highly functional.
Wow. Okay, so let's recap the journey. We started with the simple ticking clock, the universal flow. Then relativity fractured that, made time relative. The block universe potentially froze it, making everything coexist. Quantum mechanics might even erase it fundamentally.
Right.
Then we looked inward and found neuroscience showing our brain actively builds the flow, manipulates duration and sequence.
A constructed experience.
So yeah, we've definitely moved way beyond simple answers. It's deep, deep territory.
It really is. And it leaves you with some pretty profound things to think about. For instance, if that subjective feeling of flow is indeed an illusion, maybe a necessary one for how our minds work, how might that change the way you approach your own life?
How so?
Well, if you take the block universe idea seriously for a moment, that mathematically your past, present, and future are all equally real points in space-time, does that change how you feel about the present? Does it lessen the anxiety about an uncertain future if it's already there?
Or maybe increase appreciation for the present slice you happen to be experiencing?
Possibly. Does it change the weight of past regrets if the past is just another location, not something truly gone? What does that shift in perspective do to the urgency or the permanence you assign to moments? If every moment is, in a sense, eternally present within the block, what does that feel like to contemplate?
That is definitely something to mull over. As you navigate your own, perhaps constructed, present moment, it really makes you wonder what other big assumptions we live by might be worth this kind of deep dive into the evidence.
The questions certainly don't stop here.